You're listening to Culture 360, the podcast that takes you inside the world of workplace and team culture. I'm Stu Savage, your host and guide, as we explore the ideas, people, and stories shaping the way we work, lead, and connect. So please subscribe, sit back, relax, and enjoy culture from every angle. Oh, and welcome to the Culture 360 podcast, Culture from Every Angle. With me today, one friend from school, Chris McLoughlin. Really wanted to open up with Chris. I don't know if you remember this. At school, probably sat next to each other at form, probably year 10 and 11. Can't even remember who the teacher was, to be honest. Mr. Maskew.
Mr. Maskew was the first year when we were at Haydock High School. So I think we might have had Miss Jones one year, one of the PE teachers. It's hard to remember, isn't it?
I vividly remember sitting next to you, and it was probably towards the end of year 11 before we all set off on a new adventure somewhere, wherever we went. And I think he had like a little, people were having their shirts signed, if you probably remember that. And then you had like the little journal book. And I always remember, and I think he actually sent me a picture of it, because it's actually 31 years since we've met, which is bizarre. But we actually remember putting in there that I hope Liverpool win the league in the actual book. And I think you've had the last laugh on that one, because obviously there's been a couple of Premier League titles and a couple of European Cups since then. So you've had the last laugh on that one, and obviously the most recent one.
Yeah, it was tricky at school though, because obviously, in the 1990s, Liverpool weren't successful. They, won the league in 1990, and then it kind of all went a bit wrong in the start of the Premier League era where Man United were dominating. So being in a school that's full of Liverpool, Everton, and Man United fans at the time, it wasn't the best time to be a Red. Whereas if we were all in school now, I'd be living my best life.
Like I said, you've had the last laugh. And then from school, you went on to journalism. So you can tell us a little bit about the background of how that happened, but also you've got this love affair and passion with Liverpool. So how did the two come together? And it sounds like a bit of a dream job, really.
Yeah, so once I'd finished uni, I did communication studies at a university called Edge Hill, which is in Hillsborough. And at the time, that summer, I did, part of that was media. And the Liverpool Echo were running a graduate training scheme. So you had to apply, go for an interview, did a group interview, and then they took 20 candidates, placed us all at a weekly newspaper fortnight, and took the best 10 on a graduate training scheme. So I did 2 weeks at the Southport Visitor. This is not sport related at all, just working on news. And then I got took on to the graduate training scheme. So that meant I had to study for my NCTJ, which is the journalism qualification in the UK.
Right.
That was a day a week at college in Liverpool, and then do 4 days a week at a local paper. So I was based at the Ormskirk Advertiser, covering news essentially, going to planning meetings and people having disputes over trees, over looking at gardens, and all kinds of stuff like that. At the same time, they covered Skelmersdale United and Burstow football clubs, local non-league teams. Yeah. So I would go. There was sports editor, but occasionally when you couldn't attend, I would go and cover the matches as well, because obviously I've got a huge love of football. In April 2000, a job at the Liverpool Echo came up on the sports desk. And I wasn't quite qualified. I was only doing my exams in May. And the job was to write an independent Liverpool FC magazine called the Klopp magazine, which is a newspaper which ran from 1995 to 2015. Part of that as well would be on the Liverpool Echo sports desk as a backup Liverpool FC writer. So I applied for it. And from when I was going to uni, I was writing articles for Liverpool fanzines. So I'd already built up a little kind of portfolio of my work. It just so happened that the nature of this Klopp magazine, they wanted someone who's opinionated and wasn't just writing match reports and stuff, who'd got an opinion, who goes to the matches, who knows the club. I've been going to Anfield since 1987, which is a long time. I've been season ticket since the early 90s, since the non-glory days, I could say. And the two things just married together. So the Echo took me on to proviso, pass me exams. And then I had a mad week in May 2000 where I worked on the Ormskirk Advertiser on Monday, got a call to say one of our teams, Broken's leg, play football, you're going to have to start tomorrow, you're going to have to come in early. So I was on the Ormskirk Advertiser on the Monday, I went to the Liverpool Echo on the Tuesday, I think I did the back page lead on the Wednesday, I did 2 exams on the Thursday, and then I think I did half a day at the Echo and another exam on the Friday.
Wow.
And then from there, I've remained, the company's now owned by Reach. And in 2002, we started a publishing section called Sport Media, it's now called Reach Sport. and we won the contract to do Liverpool FC's matchday programme, and at the time a weekly magazine. So I become part of that team, and I'm still there.
So how long is that?
As of May this year, I've been in this business for 25 years. We've had the Liverpool contract for 22 of those 25 years. The way it works is football club programmes are tendered out to different companies every so often. You can get 2 years, 3 years, 5-year contracts. We did it initially from 2002 to 2012, company for 3 years, and then they came back to us in 2015, and we're still doing that.
Sounded like a baptism of fire that week.
Unbelievable. I distinctly remember having to ghostwrite Jan Molby's Liverpool Echo column. He was a columnist for the Echo at the time. And when you see a column in a newspaper, 99 times out of 100 are not written by the person who's got the head at the top of the page.
Okay.
It's written by a journalist who rings them up to get their views, and they articulate it for them. I had to ghostwrite his column, and then I became Ian Rush's ghostwriter for 2 years on the Echo. So I got to know Ian Rush really well. I had to help him a lot to articulate his thoughts, because he's the greatest goal scorer in Liverpool's history. Yeah. He's not necessarily always the greatest talker. But it got him a foot into the media, and he's now a Liverpool FC ambassador who travels the world promoting the club, and he's very articulate with what he says. So I think helping him along that route at that time, back in 2000, so he's talking 25 years ago, just helped him a little bit as well. But yeah, to go from working in Ormskirk, writing about planning permission, to writing about Liverpool on the back page of one of the most famous daily newspapers in the country, was a massive baptism of fire.
And then you're rubbing shoulders with Liverpool royalty now at the football club.
Well, that's it. So yes, we do the matchday programme and the All Red digital magazine that goes to the All Red members. And part of that role is interviewing players, or going to press conferences, or obviously covering games, interviewing ex-players, writing features, the whole myriad of roles really. And you've got to know your subject as well, which is obviously as a lifelong read, it massively helps, because after a game, for instance, if you're in a thing called the mix zone, you've got the press and the players can mingle, you don't know who you're going to speak to, you've got to react to what's happened on the pitch. Or sometimes I can go to the AXA training centre for the media day, and you don't know who's coming in for the interview for the next programme. They'll just say, Chris, here you go, here's Ryan Gravenberch, and you've got 10 minutes with him, so that's your interview. You can't prep for it.
Right.
Because you don't know who's going to walk through that door.
Okay.
So it can make it difficult, depending on who the player is. Now, obviously, it's a really famous player who's at the top of his game, like Ryan Gravenberch, well, and just get into a chat and have a conversation like we are. If it's one of the youngsters who's just been brought through, and the youngsters tend to be quite shy, and you get quite short answers, you've got to kind of work hard, but also you need to try and know as much about them as you can, sort of like just off the cuff.
Yeah.
Which makes it tricky. It's a real sort of skill to learn that.
So you've got to obviously be on your toes in that situation, and obviously know your apples.
Absolutely. The way I kind of do it is more trying to have a conversation with him when you can, and it all depends on who the player is. Now, everybody in football now comes from different backgrounds, from different countries, different cultures, different religions, everything. Completely different lads. I'll give you one example. I was down at Melbourne when Liverpool trained there into Christmas and New Year, interviewing Emre Can, who was a German ball player who played under Klopp. And as he walked in, I said to him, "Oh, Merry Christmas, Emre." He went, "I don't celebrate, I'm Muslim." I said, "I know, but I was just being polite to him. Merry Christmas, Chris." So even they'll have a laugh with you. Yeah, there's still people at the end of the day. But even those cultural little things they can have a little laugh about. It wasn't like he was pretentious overly saying Merry Christmas when he's not a Christian, for instance. And little things like that, you've got to be aware of, but you also got to work around and talk around.
And it's those little intricacies that that you've just mentioned there that really people want to know about, and things like this podcast today. The Culture 360 podcast focuses very much on, obviously, organisational culture from every angle, hence the name 360, in association with the Culture Room, which is a business that I've started around building effective and inclusive connected cultures. So I'm trying to drill down into obviously you've got the passion for the football club, and you've got your background and your profession of journalism. But how is that personal connection and you being in the inner sanctum of the club? Have you seen anything in and around culture and building of the club? Because obviously it's a rich history, goes back, over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been ups and downs within the club, like every football club. Some real high moments winning European Cups and some real dynasties as well in the 70s and the 80s. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that, about your personal connection and what you've seen in the inner sanctum?
Yeah, I think the big thing that puts Liverpool ahead of a lot of other clubs, it's a winning culture. Everything's designed for the club to be successful. There was a famous saying that a former owner, David Moores, said once, that Liverpool Football Club exists to win trophies and nothing else. It serves no other purpose. And I think that culture and that ethos and that mentality started by Bill Shankly in the 1960s when he took over. Well, he took over in December 1959 when Liverpool were in the second division and struggling. But he went down in 1954 and couldn't get back up. He brought them up in 1962. They won the league in 64, first FA Cup in 65, and the league again in 66. At a time when Liverpool as a city was being hugely successful because of the music scene with the Beatles. The fans on the Kop were become renowned as the first set of fans who really started singing with chants and stuff, and it all married together at the same time. To me, to build a culture that Liverpool has now. So it's a winning culture now. It's obviously different managers in different areas. It happens in different ways, and there's different ways of being successful. Ultimately, when a player comes to Liverpool, or whoever comes to Liverpool, it's drilled into them that you're here to win. And I think that's the big difference. Not every club can be as big as Liverpool. Not every club can win as much as Liverpool. And obviously, the bigger you are, the more money you've got, the more it helps you to sign the best players and all the rest of it. But at the same time, you have to have the right individuals in the club with the right mentality. And that goes from the top. It goes from the owners, to the chief executive, to the director of football, to the managers, to the coaches, to the players, the staff, to the fans. And I think it's kind of inbuilt in a way that I think it was, Shankly said, first is first, second is nothing 1 year. And like you said about the dynasties of the 60s and the 70s, Bob Paisley took over from Shankly. And in his 9 seasons, I'm pretty sure they never finished lower than second. Or they finished fifth 1 year, sorry, but won the European Cup.
Right.
So that was a bad season. And he joked once, he said, I was here for the bad times too. We finished second once. It was just that mentality, though. You were just, you don't want to assume they were going to win. You had to win. And I think that stays culturally within a club like that. And I think you can probably see it in some other clubs around the world, Real Madrid, for one. I think it's, coming to the fore at Paris Saint-Germain at the moment. They're a new club who are building that way. But at Liverpool specifically, it all comes back to the same goal, really, with football matches, win trophies, celebrate.
And is that something that's by design, or has that happened organically?
Both, I would say. Shankly's job when he came in was to restore Liverpool back to success. And they had won the league before. Most recently, before he came in, was 1947. They won a couple in the 1920s, a couple in the 1900s. But there was no dynasty, there was no sustained period. Even in the 1900s, they got relegated in between winning the two leagues. So it was very much a club like any other. He changed that. And then I think because of that, and the people of the city and the people of the club realised what they've got, they designed it so it stayed like that. And the big way they did that was continuity. There was a chairman called T.V. Williams, and then another one called Sir John Smith. And when Shankly went, if you look at the managerial history of Liverpool, Bob Paisley, who was his assistant, took over. Bob Paisley stayed 9 years. When he went, Joe Fagan, his assistant, took over. Joe Fagan did 2 years. When he went, Kenny Dalglish, legendary player, became the first club's player manager. And they kept that continuity right the way through. And when he went, Graham Souness came back in, former captain, and that's when it didn't work because he tried to change a lot. He felt the club needed modernising, which in some ways it did. He tried to do too much too soon. He bought the wrong players as at the start point, but he brought in some European methods he'd learned when he was playing for Sampdoria in Italy, and the club just wasn't quite ready. It needed to be a more gradual change rather than a bull in a china shop style. He got rid of a lot of the players too soon, and their experience would have helped in the sort of like transition to a new era, because this was just when the Premier League started as well. Different clubs are getting different money, new rivalries are coming. Man United made the most of it with their commercial side, which Liverpool hadn't developed well enough at the time. And I think it was only restored when Gerard Houllier came back in.
Okay.
He's probably underrated, really, in terms of what he actually did for Liverpool. Right. Setting the modern day building blocks. For starters, Liverpool don't train at Melwood anymore, but he redeveloped it. It was called the Millennium Pavilion. They built a whole new thing with hydro pool and all the sort of mod cons.
Yeah.
This is like
sports science.
Yeah, sports science, brought all that in, changed the players' diets and all the rest of it. And I think the modern Liverpool It's seeped in the history of what Shankly set up, but also Houllier was a massive building block along.
Okay. So do you think he's actually seen what's happened previous to him and actually brought that back in?
Yeah.
I thought that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, I mean, Houllier was a teacher in Liverpool for a while before he got into football coach, and he actually went to a game, stood on the cop at Anfield with a guy called Patrick Burge, who ended up becoming his assistant manager. And so he realised what the city was about, what the team was about, what could be achieved if you did it right.
Mm.
And again, he also brought in a lot of new players, and he was the first manager who really brought in foreign players. But he set up the culture, and he was quite strict, like mobile phones were banned from the training ground. For instance, everything was focused on winning. And I think kind of lost its way in the 90s under Souness, and then when Roy Evans took over. I think Roy Evans, he was needed to stabilise the club, but he was another member of the old boot room staff, which I know we're going to touch on in a bit. But in some ways, in terms of bringing the club forward, it was a backward step. They tried to go back to some of those ways at the time, and you needed to merge those ways with the modern way of playing football and the modern way of sports science.
You've touched on the boot room there, and I think that's probably quite pivotal to this narrative and interview that we're doing today. How would you describe the boot room? I mean, what was it? It's almost mythical.
Yeah, the boot room was the inner sanctum. It was Anfield's inner sanctum. For people who don't know the story, the boot room is, as it sounds, was a room where people kept their boots at Anfield.
Mm.
And Joe Fagan, who was a coach of Liverpool at the time when Bill Shankly was manager, he was gifted some crates of Guinness for some reason. I can't remember exactly why. But once the drinks were drunk, they turned the crates over in the boot room to sit on.
Right.
And they just sit around chewing the fat. So you would have Joe Fagan, Bob Paisley, Roy Evans, Ronnie Moran, who was a former player who coached for 49 years, John Bennison, a couple of others. Not the manager, though. Bill Shankly stayed out of it generally. Okay. So it was left for his staff to do. And as part of that, they would not only chew the fat and discuss things, Ronnie Moran religiously kept notes of what they did. So they could look back and say, when the team was on a successful run, what were we doing at the time? When the team was having a bad run, had we changed anything? Were we doing something different? What was happening? And they used that as a reference for everything. And Liverpool's culture of winning was massively born in that room. It wasn't just Shankly the manager. But behind every manager, there was a team. And I know managers are always the figureheads. But if you ask Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, for example, it's not just down to him. It was down to the coach and staff. And he changed his coaching staff over the years at United to freshen things up. But he relied on them as much as Shankly relied on Paisley and Fagan. And every decision they made and every sort of process they went through was done in that room at Anfield. Probably at an era when you spent more time at the stadium than you did at the training ground. And it did gain a mythical status because they used to invite opponents in after games, managers, chairman, whatever, for a welcome drink, to say, unlucky lads who lost again at Anfield, have a beer with us. But they were also picking their brains and trying to find out little snippets of information. So they were quite clever. Watford, for example, Elton John went into the boot room afterwards and asked for a pink gin. And I think they said, we've only got stout, lad, or something like that. But they were probably picking his brains about John Barnes, who ended up playing for Liverpool.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that for sure, but it would be the type of thing that crops up. Just not necessarily going, we like this player, we want to buy him. It would just be saying, he's quick, that John Barnes, isn't he?
Yeah.
And then just seeing what he says. And they learnt over the years which managers and chairmen would come in and slag off their own players and teams and which ones would be a bit more cautious. And one or two even avoided the boot room because I think they probably got onto what was actually happening. And all part of that was part of Liverpool's culture of success.
That boot room, and you mentioned the inner sanctum, it seemed like there was a lot of trust. It was almost like a little fortress, a lot of connection. It was the brain's trust, if you like. And it was people that were trusted and to form part of that core. And it seems like almost like a fortress that people had to kind of break into or needed a reason to be there. You're talking about Roy Evans and Ronnie Moran, who were probably slightly younger than the likes of Fagan and Paisley, but would have to be trusted and have that knowledge to be part of that group.
It's all about personality as well and who fitted. So, if you were someone who wasn't compatible personality-wise with Paisley and Fagan and their ways of doing things, he wouldn't have been part of the backroom team. Okay. So Ronnie Moran and Roy Evans were both ex-players. Roy Evans, his career finished early due to injury, but they saw something in that they thought would make a good coach.
Yeah.
So they kind of assimilated him to manage the reserves. Ronnie Mann was an ex-player, played a lot of games for Liverpool. But he was like a bit of a Sergeant Major type of character, very vocal, very vociferous, a leader. And again, Shankly saw that in him and they offered him the chance to be a coach, but he retired. And it's those two personalities, very different people, but both needed at a football club to get different things from different players. Joe Fagan, the players always used to say he was an arm around the shoulder type of manager.
Yeah.
Ronnie Mann give you a rollicking.
Okay.
And you needed those two things. And another good story, just speaking of Ronnie Moran, is talk about Liverpool being success and the culture. When Liverpool were successful and they won the league, you would go around the dressing room cardboard box going, you deserve one, you deserve one, you deserve one, and just hand them out like that. There was no sort of fanfare, there was no big, on the pitch hanging, somebody's, putting around your neck like you do in the modern game. You're just in a box and you just handed them out.
Right.
And then he'd be like, right, lads, we've got that one on to next season. So there was no big celebration or the rest of it. The mentality was, you've done your job, now go and do it again. And I think that is where Liverpool's success emanated from at that time.
So there's almost an element of humility around that. There was no fanfare. It wasn't like airs and graces.
Yeah.
Like he just gave them out willy-nilly.
Yeah, and then I think it was Ronnie Mann who used this phrase, but there's no Bertie Big Bollocks allowed. It was that type of culture where if you had an ego or you got too big for your boots, they got rid of you.
Right.
And they would get rid of you.
Yeah.
You look at it now, like for instance, Emily Hughes lifted the European Cup, Liverpool's captain, 1977, 1978. He was 29, thinking about 78. At that time, they thought he's past his best, he's got rid of him. Right. Gone to Wolves. He was captain of Liverpool FC, not even in his 30s. And because they thought, right, he's done his job, we've got as much out of him as we can, now we need the next one. It was ruthless, but it worked. And you need to be like that. It was also being a good judge of when a player's past the best. Even if the fans might not necessarily think that, or the players certainly wouldn't think that, they would make those decisions and bring in the next person. And hence Liverpool kept winning.
Do you think like Liverpool went out and actually hired for talent or hired for cultural fits, both within the playing staff and the coaching staff? Did you have to, with personality, have to fit into the club? You mentioned before, not Bertie Big Bollocks, so it's about humility.
Yeah.
And people on that level.
It still does. And there was a saying that when Klopp was manager, they had a no dickheads policy when they were signing players. So basically, it wasn't just signing a player for his quality on the pitch. They looked into the personality and the character as much as what you could do with football. And I think it was a good policy because we saw in the past at Liverpool when the team wasn't doing as well, there were talented players who had the wrong attitude. Al-Hadj Diouf, the Senegalese footballer who started in the World Cup in 2002 and came to Liverpool, is a classic example. Talented footballer, but real lack of humility, real lack of being bothered if they lost. I'll say unprofessional at times. He spat at a Celtics fan during a UEFA League game, Europa League game. And those type of players haven't been at Liverpool for a long, long time now. And that was a big part of the Klopp era, I would say. Klopp was charismatic. He was all about personality. He was a motivator. But you needed the players to respond. There's a famous story that when Klopp took over from Brendan Rodgers in 2015, Mario Balotelli was still there. And on the first day, from what I heard, he said to him, Mario, me and you's not going to work out, is it? I think Balotelli agreed, and then he was off.
And that was it. You do see that at other clubs. I had the opportunity to go to the Bernabeu last year and discovered that Real Madrid had wrote this book basically on values and called the Real Madrid Way, which I put on the actual blog for anybody listening, the Culture 360 blog, and found it really, like you, just to tie into what you said about certain clubs having sets of values and the dynasty, and there's probably nobody bigger than Real Madrid on the world football scene. Yeah. So obviously, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for everybody else. But you do see these patterns emerging at other clubs. You've mentioned players actually being moved on because they didn't fit because of the character and personality, or they'd obviously been a bit naughty. Yep, disciplinary problems, so they didn't really fit in. So I found it quite interesting how certain values and beliefs of clubs, it kind of runs underneath the club. And although you need to dig in to find out what they are, it really is that thread running through the club. And you've mentioned several with Liverpool.
Yeah, and it brings success, doesn't it? So if you look at some of the clubs away from Liverpool who aren't performing as well, issues between managers and players. Man United's a great example, isn't it? So Marcus Rashford was the Liverpool dressing room I've known for, certainly the Klopp here and the Arne Slot here. You don't hear of any problems like this.
Okay.
You don't hear of issues between the manager and players. There will be at times, because if a player's not playing, you're not going to be happy. But it's how you manage that. And I think one of the ways Klopp was clever, and Slott's doing the same, is they cultivated a squad ethos. So Klopp drummed it into his players that whether you start or not, you've got a part to play. You're as important as somebody who plays every game, even if you're only coming on. Because he was a great advocate of having the 5 subs as well, so we could give players more game time and keep the squad fresh. And if you went back and looked through the Klopp era, the number of goals, important goals scored by substitutes, is a record. I mean, I know there are more subs now, but the number of times a Divock Origi, for instance, would come on. Never going to be a first team player starting every week for Liverpool when you've got Firmino, Mane, and Salah. But he'd come on and make an impact.
Yeah.
He'd come on and score, a last minute winner against Everton in a Merseyside derby. Came on and scored in the Champions League final. And that's because it was drummed into him that even though you're not playing every week, you're just as important as the guys who are playing every week. And he played his part in successes. And without those players, without those squads now, you can't achieve in football, because the game's a lot quicker, the intensity is a lot harder, it's more physically demanding than it's ever been, and you have to have the squad and make the most of it to be successful. But that will only happen if the players buy into it, and even when they're not playing, they're happy.
There's an old saying about your culture, and if you don't control your culture, it will control you.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like with some of those managers, they've actually set out to build that environment and then put the pieces in place, rather than coming in with the existing culture and trying to change it. It can be problematic.
Yeah.
And a lot of that seems to centre around, as culture does, it's about people and it's about relationships. And some of those managers, like Klopp, who was quite charismatic, could build those relationships between people. And if you didn't buy into it, then obviously your future didn't labour.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. And I think he also built the relationship between the crowd again. I think he realised that he could harness Anfield to make it a fortress, because Liverpool had some good times under Brendan Rodgers under the last season. They were vulnerable at Anfield. A team like Carlisle United took us to penalties in the League Cup, for example, and could have easily won on penalties. You just don't know. So a little bit that was lacking. At times, I think Klopp realised the power of Anfield. And right at the start, funny talking about Origi, he scored a last-minute equaliser into West Brom to get a 2-2 draw, struggling West Brom. So not a great result on paper. But at the end of the game, Klopp made all his players go down to the Kop, start lifting their arms up like they do in German football, as if they just won something. And he got ridiculed, he got a lot of stick. But the crowd bought into it.
Right.
And the message he was sending was, if you stay behind us, we were never out of the game. So it might be the 92nd, 93rd, 94th, whatever minute, and we're not winning. Keep with us and we'll get something. And if you go from that moment, that would have been 2015 to now 2025. Virgil van Dijk, Liverpool captain now, he's been at the club since 2018. In that time, he has lost 3 league games at Anfield.
Wow.
In 8 years. And that just shows that the Anfield has become a fortress, because I think the fans were made to believe it can be a fortress. They bought into that culture that the manager set up. You back us, we'll bring you silverware. And it's always hard to quantify how important fans are.
Yeah.
Everybody's always said that, a fan doesn't put the ball in the net. They're just there. But you can create an aura, you can create a fear factor, and I feel that's that.
And I think that's something that we really try and nail with this podcast series, to know whether it's sport or not, what is the secret sauce, and can you put your finger on what culture is, not just to you, Chris, but to the club, to the fans.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, if you go back and look at Liverpool in the 70s, it was almost like the Kop was sucking the ball into the goal.
Exactly.
And it was almost like you said, that aura, and how important the fans are, especially in a sporting context.
Yeah.
It's not just about the players and the coaching staff.
It's not. It's basically a community. And, going back to Shankly in the 60s, he drummed into everyone that the fans were as important as the players. It was a collective. He was a great socialist, Shankly, and he believed that, people who are working hard for a living, get the Saturday afternoon off, deserve some kind of enjoyment and downtime reward. And their reward's watching Liverpool win football matches and collectively enjoying that. And it is a collective thing with Liverpool. And I think recently, obviously the sad passing of Diogo Jota's shown that, and the way the response has been. There's currently, as we sat here, there's a sea of flowers outside Anfield now, outside the main stand, running out of space. There's so many tributes. And there's fans from all over the world now in Liverpool who are coming to pay their respects. Also, people involved in other clubs. We've seen Everton, for instance. David Moyes has been over. Some of the players have been over. It's a sign of mutual respect in the city. And I think the city of Liverpool is a big reason why Liverpool Football Club has been successful. The nature of the people.
Yeah.
There's generally three conversations in Liverpool: it's football, football, and football. So if you don't support a football team in Liverpool, you're sort of almost an outsider, really, in a lot of ways. And that sort of desire and passion, you look at the sheer number of people out on the homecoming parade after Liverpool in the league last season. The people out paying respects to Diogo. It's almost like the fans are the club in a lot of ways. I always think I would describe the people who go to Anfield as supporters, not spectators, because they're almost participants because they play a role. And it is a myth to say like it's a wall of noise for 90 minutes for every single game, because the best one in the world, you can't have the same atmosphere for a Barcelona Champions League semi-final as a Saturday 12:30 kickoff against Bournemouth. It's two different worlds, and it shouldn't be the same. And I think that is the secret sauce behind Liverpool's success at Anfield, is that the crowd raise themselves at the right times, at the right moments, in the right games. You can go to some clubs on the continent where it's just a constant sound of people banging drums and chanting, and it doesn't dip and ebb and flow. Anfield ebbs and flows, sucks you into the whirlpool. I don't know the facts or the stats on this, but I always felt under Klopp, and it's felt a bit the same on the slot. When Liverpool get one, they can quickly get another.
Yeah.
At Anfield, because players' heads go. It's that noise that surrounds, and I think even the design of Anfield House, it's like a chocolate box almost now, the way the stands have been done. You must feel in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Everybody's against you. Goal goes in, your head goes down, all of a sudden this sort of the red arrows are coming at you again, and oh my God, they scored again. And that happens so much on the clock, and it happened on the slot. And I think that ebb and flow of the crowd, and the crowd knowing when the players need a bit extra and knowing when to get involved, is, as you put it, a secret sauce.
I think with culture, there's a couple of things that come into my mind when you were talking there. Like I asked somebody over in New Zealand, where I live now, a couple of weeks ago, what culture meant to them. Mm-hmm. And they referred to one of the Silver Ferns, which is the netball team, the national team, that one of the coaches had turned around and said, it's like the wind. You know when it's with you at the back. You can't touch it or feel it, but you also know it's in your face, and you're obviously pushing against it. And again, to go back to Liverpool in the 70s, it was almost like it was that unstoppable force that you couldn't see. And you mentioned also community connection, and something that I'm going to speak to a guy called Andy Martin, who's a lecturer in New Zealand at Massey University. He wrote a book on the All Blacks and one on the Silver Ferns. Mm-hmm. He co-authored it, I should say. And a lot of that talks about the sense of belonging and community and connection. Yeah. And it seems to me that Liverpool, especially with the fans, have built a sense of belonging, to community and connection, but it also emanates into the city. Mm-hmm. And the people of Liverpool, and all that history, the Beatles that you mentioned, the football clubs, obviously the people across Stanley Park who've now got a new stadium, which I'm keen to go and see on my trip over here to the UK. So building that sense of belonging and togetherness seems real key, and Liverpool have really cracked it. And like you said, it's something that's ebbed and flowed though, and there have been parts where Liverpool, the wheels may have fell off. And there was a long time between drinks, between winning Premier League titles, but we've had European Cups in that time. So how important do you think those relationships and community connections been to the club? Absolutely massive. And, the Hillsborough disaster played a big part in that as well. Obviously, nobody should go to football or should not come home. But to lose 97 supporters in one day, in one game, it was just horrific. Mm. And the way the club and the city rallied together, both sides of the city, blue and red, overseen by Kenny Dalglish and his family. Liverpool as a club had somebody at every single funeral. At the time of the disaster, it was 95, and obviously the number has gone up since. But where else would that happen? Where else would you have a city where your football club has a representative at 95 funerals in the space of a few weeks? And I think that sort of relationship between the club and the fans was special anyway. But after what happened in 1989, became unbreakable bond. There have been issues along the way with the previous owners. Who wanted to build a new stadium and get rid of Anfield and weren't running the club properly.
But the fans fought against that and got rid of them to get the current owners in. And now obviously there's success again. And I think Liverpool would not be the club it is without the support it has. I think it's been a massive factor in how Liverpool have become, English football's most successful team. If you go anywhere in the world, there are Liverpool fans. And I think a lot of those people buy into the culture and the ethos of the club. And I think, Liverpool's probably the one club I can think of, just off the top of my head, who's got a song title on the club crest and Never Walk Alone. I know fans of other supporters or fans of other clubs don't necessarily like the song and all the rest of it, but the meaning behind that song, that I've heard that song sung as a hymn. I've heard it sung at memorial services. I've heard it sung in victory. I've heard it sung in defeat. I was in Istanbul in 2005 at half time and Liverpool were losing 3-0 to AC Milan in the Champions League final. The supporter, you're in deepest, darkest Turkey, they might have gone, oh no, they were all singing Never Walk Alone at half time. The players heard it come out, get 3 goals in 6 minutes and then went on penalties. Would that have happened if the players didn't think that the support was still with them? Probably not. And I think that connection has underpinned everything that Liverpool have achieved over the years. It is partly because Liverpool's the world in one city, but it's a city like no other place. It's its own, micro culture, I would say. Scouse is its own language, friendly people, and the people will fight for their city. But for both sides of the city, they'll fight for blue and red. They'll fight with each other, but they're all still mates at the end of the day. It has underpinned everything Liverpool have achieved, and probably created its own culture in itself. You only have to look now. There's a number of really successful fan groups: Redmen TV, the Anfield Rap, the Boss Knights. They are all fan groups that are formed by the fans about Liverpool FC and are now run as their own businesses. The Boss Knights is a brilliant example. People have probably heard of. There's an artist in Liverpool called Jamie Webster. He's been quite successful now as a solo career. He started out by singing Liverpool songs in local pubs.
Okay.
And he's now playing Glastonbury.
Wow.
It just shows where it can lead. So it's not just about the actual game when you support Liverpool. If you're in the Anfield vicinity in the hours before a game, there's a couple of hotels on Anfield Road which have got massive beer gardens where live musicians play and sing all the songs around before the game. And you get people who aren't even going to the game who go for the fan bits before the match.
Okay.
And then we'll watch the game on TV in those hotels and bars. And it's all part of this huge sort of like community who want to feel part of every game, whether they're attending or not. And there's the Boss Nights, for people who don't know, they're basically like post-game parties where musicians again play Liverpool songs in different venues. And that started during the Brendan Rodgers era. You only get maybe a couple of hundred people. It was just a group of mates really who started it. We want somewhere we can, after the match, go and hear some live music and all meet up and be together. So it started to the point where now, when Liverpool have reached Champions League finals, there's been these massive fan parks, which are organised by the Boss Night team. The one in Madrid before the 2019 Champions League final, Salvador Dali Square was unreal. You couldn't count how many people there were. There's so many people. And obviously they weren't all going to the match. They just wanted to be in Madrid because Liverpool were playing a Champions League final there. And I went to Doha when Liverpool played in the FIFA Club World Cup when we won that for the first time. And incredibly, there was a Boss Night fan park full of Liverpool fans on a golf course, just outside of Doha, which was really busy. Actually selling alcohol in, they managed to convince them to sell alcohol in a dry country. And the lightning seeds were playing. And so, again, I'm not hearing those type of stories in the current FIFA Club World Cup of Manchester City fans and Chelsea fans having these type of fan parks organised by the fans, not by the clubs, not by FIFA, by themselves, and setting these up all around the world. I think that's just all part of this culture, this community. It's a way of life. I think supporting Liverpool for a lot of people, it is your life. Everything else surrounds the fixtures that you do.
Yeah. You've touched on a few things there, and if you peel culture back, the godfather of culture is a guy called Edgar Schein, who has a concept very much like the diagram is an iceberg. and the things that you can see above the water, like an iceberg, and the things below. And the things below are things like beliefs, values, attitudes, assumptions, emotions, stories.
Yeah.
Like we're obviously talking about narratives today. And then the things you can see above the water, like the iceberg, the behaviours. And you've mentioned some of the artifacts and symbols. So you mentioned the club badge, the stadium, the cup, the banners. So there's a whole heap of things in there around what you can see and what you can't see. And I think they're probably both as important as each other. You also mentioned the fan base driving things from the bottom up rather than the club driving things top down.
Yeah.
So it's both. It's top down and bottom up. And it sounds like people within the club are taking ownership of certain elements, like whether it's a concert or a gig or something, and actually just gone and done it. But then that's developed the culture within the club too.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's a bottom-up culture, but ultimately the fans never change. The fans will always be there no matter who's running the club. It doesn't matter who owns it, who the chief executive, who the manager is, who the players are. The fans stay, and the fans keep that culture. And it's for the people at the club, and people working for the club, or people writing about the club like myself, to embed themselves in that culture and not try and change that culture, not do things different. And Liverpool are good at that. They don't try and generally go against what the fans want. I think they're clever enough, the people who run the club, to realise it's a massive asset to have so many supporters and this sort of winning mentality. But also to have fun. Going to the match, you want to see your team win, but ultimately it's a social event as much as it is seeing a game of football. It's a shared 90 minutes and more with your mates, with your family, with your kids, whoever that may be. And obviously it's better when the team's winning. You don't want to be turning up and losing 19 games every season. And that does create a better atmosphere and a better feeling. But ultimately, even when the team aren't doing well, the fans are still there. They're still going to the match. They're still trying to enjoy themselves. And that comes from that bottom-up culture.
And again, to go back to some of these things, the culture is the people, and it's about the relationships. And it's something like you said, in and around the club and the city, is very much about the club, the relationships, and the people. It is the people. Without the people, you just have an empty stadium, right? And there's nothing there. Just to wrap up, we've got a few questions here and a few standard questions that we would like to ask every participant on the podcast, but also personable to you. And what's one, I guess, a bit of a left field thing that you believe about culture within Liverpool, or one idea or one thought that you've had that people might not necessarily consider about Liverpool Football Club or journalism?
Keep flags, scouts. I'll give you 3 words. So Liverpool fans have got their own culture that when you make a banner, you've got to be fitting in with the tradition.
Okay.
So most homemade Liverpool fans make their own banners, and most of them are red background, white writing. You don't see St George's crosses. Occasionally, you used to see some Union Jacks. It's not about the country. It's about Liverpool. A while ago, through one of the fanzines, probably in the 90s, to try and protect that tradition, there was a Keep Flag Scouts campaign. All tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, it wasn't really tongue-in-cheek. It was just making the point that if you are come supporting Liverpool, follow our traditions. And this was at a time when obviously the fan base was growing from all corners of the world and stuff like that. People at the heart of the club, the scouts, Liverpool fans, supporters, wanted to protect the traditions. So when you see the cop and all the banners on it is a sea of red. It's not a sea of flags and George's Cross. Like if you went to an England game, you see an England flag with Haydock on, or you see an England flag with Eastbourne on, or whatever. But you see that at Wembley when other clubs play there. You'll have Man City playing at Wembley, Halifax Blues or stuff like that. You don't see that in Liverpool. Okay. It's not about where you're from. It's about where you are.
Right. That's a very poignant way of putting it. Also on that score, you mentioned rituals and traditions. And just before we wrap up, the rituals and traditions, rituals are very much like a 1% play, if you like. The things that you do day in, day out, and you've mentioned a heap of them, especially around the boot room. But then traditions are the big things, as you've mentioned. You mentioned a few traditions there.
Massive tradition that we've not touched on is this Anfield sign. So when you leave the tunnel at Anfield, there's a sign that was installed when Bill Shankly was the manager that says, "This is Anfield." Not "Welcome to Anfield," not "You are at Anfield." This is Anfield. Quite imposing, really. And one of the traditions was always that the players would touch it on the way down the tunnel. Jurgen Klopp changed that. You only have to touch it when you've won something. And so I think that kind of tips the box in terms of what you're saying to me there. You don't get that anywhere else, I don't think. Other clubs have signs with tunnels and stuff, but is the one as famous as this is Anfield, is the one with so much meaning, and is the one where you only get permission to touch it when you've achieved.
Just to wrap up now, one more question was, Culture 360, the podcast, is from every angle. What's the one angle that we're missing in and around football or Liverpool? Is there anything that we've missed?
Oh, it's a tough question. I think where football clubs are concerned, there's to me there's probably sort of triangular shapes. It's not quite 360, but you've got the people running the game, the owners. You've got the team, the club itself, the squad, the coaches, employees, and you've got the fans. Now, to me, that is a 360, or however you do that. They are the three main angles. The other ways in are probably outside of the club in terms of like how a game is run by the authorities, what the grassroots is like, what the academy system's like. I don't know if there is something that we're missing. I feel like football at the elite level is so looked at by the media, so analysed, and makes use of technology and everything. I don't know if there is something culturally that's not been discovered in football. Let me understand. So if there is, I can't think of it.
Okay.
But then you should never say never, because everything evolves. Football now is not what football was 10 years ago. It's certainly not when I started going in 1987. So maybe there is something that we don't know about that will change football again.
Okay.
At the moment, the biggest change is probably on the pitch in terms of like our tactics and all the rest of the style of play and intensity. But in terms of the overall game, I would say certainly for Liverpool, there's 3 points: owners, club, fans.
2 last questions, and then we'll leave you be, Chris.
Okay.
First question is, culture is. Finish that question, or that statement. What is it to you, or what is it to the club?
Culture is community. Certainly at Liverpool, I know I've talked about a winning culture and success, but underlining it all, is the community and the shared collective of achieving, wanting to achieve, of sticking with each other even when you're not achieving. I think that's culture.
Finally, bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but who's the pick for the Premier League this season?
Got to be Everton, hasn't it? No. I'm going to say Liverpool. We're the defending champions. We're getting some good players in. We have lost some players as well. Florian Wirtz could be the most exciting signing we've made in a long time. You have to remember, Liverpool won the league by signing one player last season, Federico Chiesa. He only played 6 games.
Okay.
So the manager took Jurgen Klopp's team, made them better to win a league. Now he's bringing his own players in to impose what he wants to do. So obviously it can go 2 ways, because it can take time for players to settle. You're losing a player like Trent Alexander-Arnold's going to hurt Liverpool. Jeremy Frimpong looks brilliant, but it's going to take time. It's going to take him time to adapt to the Premier League. But I think the main rivals would be Man City. They've made a lot of signings already, but they've been playing in summer in the FIFA Club World Cup. So I've got question marks over them in terms of fatigue next season, because it's going to be a long season for them, having not had a summer. Chelsea are a wild card. They might end up being world champions, but by the time people listen to this podcast. But again, they won't have had a summer break. Arsenal will probably finish second, because that's what Arsenal seem to do every year. And I think beyond that, your Aston Villa's and Newcastle's might try and get involved. United are rebuilding. I don't think they'll be involved in the title race. And I think they'll be pushing for Europe. Newcastle could be an interesting one, because the owners have got money. If they finally decide to spend a bit more and they can keep hold of Isak and players like that, they could be involved. And I think Aston Villa have got a brilliant manager. I just don't know if they've got the squad to challenge. So I'll give you a top 4. Actually, we'll go that far. I'm going to go Liverpool.
You're on record.
Man City, Arsenal, Newcastle, in that order.
Okay, in that order. Yeah. I'm glad you did mention Man United. Obviously, that's what we bonded over, like Liverpool, Man United at school, and to come full circle. And we probably need another hour and a half to discover, what the problems are at Man United. I've been asked regularly in New Zealand, what are the issues? And I can't quite put my finger on it at the minute. I think it's a myriad of things, but that's a whole different question. Hey, Chris, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, obviously, reconnecting after 31 years, picking your brain on journalism, but more importantly, the secret sauce of Liverpool Football Club. So it's been a pleasure to have you on Culture 360, mate.
Cheers, Stu. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope everybody who's listening to this enjoys a bit of insight into Liverpool FC and the inner sanctum and why we're the best team in the world.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Cheers, Stu. Thanks, mate.
If you enjoyed the Culture 360 podcast, and like me, you geek out on leadership and organisational culture, then please smash a like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Also, if you have any feedback or ideas, or you'd like to get in touch, then please connect with the Culture Room at the.cultureroom.co.nz or on our various social media platforms. Thanks for listening.